Hello again and a very good evening to you. A very warm welcome to our little podcast, Sweet Omagh Town. And I hope to talk to Declan Ford, our co-presenter, somewhere hidden in Mountfield.
I'm here because I'm here. Do you know what I'm doing, Mr. McGurgan? I'm basking.
I'm all ears. Tell me what you're basking in.
I'm basking in my sitting room. One of my sitting rooms.
Oh, yes.
I'm here in the West Wing, and I'm just looking at the sun streaming through the windows. And alongside that, I see 6 of my wonderful poems that I have illustrated. I have the house populated with my framed poems and illustrations, and I can't tell you how wonderful it is.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. Ford, that you're not telling the truth, because I drove past your house many times, right? You're still one of these guys who uses Wonderline to steam up the windows so people don't look in. And then when someone does knock your door, you peep out through the little net curtain, put out your little Players number 6 or whatever it is, or Gallagher Greens, whatever you have to be smoking at the time, and refuse to let anybody into your house.
So it's you that throws the eggs at the house?
Yes, it is. Well, you won't eat them, so.
Well, I can't scrape them off the window. But I'm kind of hoping, if the sun heats up, at least I'll have fried eggs.
Oh, no.
No, I'm a hermit.
You are, of course.
I am a hermit.
Yes.
I'm going to be a hermit in my own little abode and peep through the steamed up windows. It cost me an absolute fortune to get the steam in the windows. I have a kettle at each window, and I boil it, and that provides protection from people outside throwing eggs, or as my father would have said, clodding eggs at my house.
Well, I'm
trying to peep in.
I'm taking you out. I'm taking you out, Mr. Ford. Will you like it or whether you don't? I'm going to take you out. If not,
you want to take me out?
Yeah, physically, if not memory, I'm going to take you down to St Enda's GA Club in Omagh, a place you were many times, and many other people listening to this programme as well. We're going back.
I hate to say that. Now, I know you're not going to tell anybody, and I know this will go no further than you, but I'm not really a fan of football.
Nor am I.
Like William Shakespeare said about poor Richard III, I that am not shaped for sportive tricks.
Yes.
I could never see the joy in going around kicking a poor ball, a pig's bladder full of air, around the pitch and golden and roaring and shouting. What?
But Mr. Shakespeare always said, if music be the food of love, play on.
Play on.
So,
Shakespeare, sure, he had it right.
He had it all. He had it all sussed out.
He was a great poet. He'd go far.
Some like yourself.
I think I'll grow a wee goatee beard like Shakespeare.
Right.
And grow the hair long.
No.
And be enigmatic behind my steamed up windows as I smoke my Gallagher Green cigarettes. But no, when you did, to be serious, when you did mention St Enda's,
yes,
I do recall going there. But my times going to St Enda's generally was dropping youngsters off at discos, watching the hordes going in, and then sitting outside a few hours later, just hoping that my sons or daughters weren't going to get killed in the melee as the people ran out, usually to chase somebody that was involved in the fight. They got out first, and then this crowd would chase after them. In fact, once, I remember I collected a carload of pre-teens who had been to disco, and it was just like a stampede, and there was a young fellow that I knew, about 10 yards in front, rolling for all these, like Billy Wiz. Do you remember Billy Wiz in the comics?
Yeah, very well.
Keeping one step or about 10 steps ahead, running for his life.
Yeah.
But that was my memory of that.
My memories are a bit more personal, because I was one of the first DJs in there. Myself, Paul Martin, who's Jackie's son, and John Scully. We were the resident guys, and then they brought in guys like Jerry Ryan from RTE2,
right,
and Paul Clark and Jim O'Neill, and all these DJs came as well. So Omagh didn't have to go out. The entertainment came to Omagh in those days.
You were DJing.
I was.
I can just imagine you with your gramophone and your 70.
Wind her up, yep.
Wind it up. I tell you, they must have had a ball.
We survived. We'd have survived it. It was all right.
Yes. I don't want to give any inkling as to how ancient you are, but how many years ago was that?
Longer than I care to remember or reveal. I would say maybe 30.
You can remember. That's more to the point.
I'll tell you better than that, how people remember. I was on an internal flight in Spain some years ago, right? I got on a plane at Alicante. It was a Spanish flight. I know the air hostesses meet you in the door on the way in and give you hola and stuff. This lady with very dark hair says, hello. I says, hello. And she says, I think I know you. says, no, you wouldn't know me. I'm from Ireland. I says, you wouldn't know me. She says, you used to do the discos in St Enda's.
Good Lord.
She married a guy from Spain. There's a young girl from Strabane. And she came
Right.
here. She says, you haven't changed a bit. And I was, treated royalty there. From
My goodness.
people with me
Obviously
thought,
her
God.
eyesight was very poor. Huh?
She remembered it very well, very fondly now. So, and
Right,
as do a
well,
lot of
that's
people. So, hey,
Well, tell me this now, to be perfectly serious about it.
Yes.
Did you provide then the music for an entire disco, or did other DJs come on as they do now, or was it just you and doing a 3-hour stint, or what? What was it?
Yeah, when there weren't the guest DJs, and yeah, myself and Paul would have done it from start around shortly after 9, 9:30 to 12, and then 12 to 1:30. There were two of us done it. So if I did the first half, Paul done the second, and vice versa. And then the other nights, then the guest DJs came in and did maybe an hour and a half of a stint, And,
Well, then, tell me this: did the St Enda's provide all the equipment, or did each DJ have to bring in their own equipment?
well, the sound and lights were there, and of their time they were very, very good. Now, by today's standards, it would be very small. But you have to imagine, Declan, this was never a purpose-built nightclub, but nor was it a purpose-built ballroom. It was just everything that it could be, and they did a great job because it was all things to all people.
Right.
And
Well, I was actually looking at a photograph that I think may or may not be put up in the Herald this week for this particular broadcast, and the ballroom floor seemed to be laid out for like a reception.
yes,
Did they have
yes,
dinner dances there?
Of course they had. Oh, any amount of them, yeah. Yeah, well, being both the home of the GA, they would have a lot of GA dinners and things, and private functions as well. If you wanted a wedding party or yeah, during the week, it was well rented out, and then it was always a very popular Thursday, and still is for bingo.
It was very ahead of its time, and though football and I don't get on, I greatly admire, all the work that the stalwarts in the GA have done over the years, for the community.
I know what you mean. I used to admire Jackie Martin, I'll tell you why, because Jackie would have been the sort of the club secretary, and he was very much hands-on. But I used to watch him at night. He would have been out maybe moving the traffic where there's maybe a bottleneck in the Gordian Road. Jackie would be out moving cars. He could be back in lifting bottles, sweeping the floor, seen him many a night heading down when we were heading away. Jackie and a couple of guys would have their shirts and sleeves rolled up, and I think that's a great sign of management. It's a great sign of people that nothing is beneath them or nothing's above them, and I think he brought great loyalty of staff as well. Yeah,
well, I admire folks like that.
Yeah.
Who, as you say, get their hands dirty and are not afraid to muck in and not only be there as a sort of a maitre d' if there's such a thing for that kind of a setup, but also to be there backstage and behind the scenes.
Oh, indeed.
And they're the people I have the most admiration for.
Indeed.
Who really put the time in and expect nothing out of it.
Not at all. It was for the love of the club, and so many people give of their time and still do, obviously. Yeah. And I'm sorry we didn't interview everyone, but Jackie just was happy to be. This is not an interview about Jackie. It's actually about his ambition to build a hotel there, and had he lived, possibly we would have had a fairly big hotel there, and that site as well.
A town and a community need people like that with vision.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I actually did go to St Enda's a few times. I went to see Christy Moore.
Okay.
Many years ago, and my abiding memory is that he brought his own security with him, and they were whispering like the FBI down their into their elbows.
Are you serious, Christy Moore?
Yeah, I think Christy maybe had made some kind of political statements, and he received, I think, maybe a few threats. And I think when he performed up here, he then had security with him, and it was quite strange, having seen Christy in much more favourable conditions.
Yeah,
and it must have been very strange as a performer to have that and to know that there were security men walking around whispering into their elbows. And I also remember going to see the great Kevin McAleer.
Yeah, Johnny Cash was there.
Yeah, it was great.
Irish Dement was there, and
Irish Dement. You're joking.
Yes. Oh, who else?
I did not.
Well, you missed it. You missed it, eh?
Because I love Irish Dement.
Oh, well, you missed it. Probably cleaning your windows, no doubt.
Oh, I believe Johnny Cash played there.
Yeah, Johnny Cash played there. The Glenn Miller Band played there. It was left, the original guys. And I mean, that's why Jackie was very open to entertainment, had a good feel for it, and then he hit the expert access to people like Seamus McCusker, who was Brian Coll's manager.
Right.
This is all sort of locally done, and you know yourself, Declan, booking bands and that is a very personal thing, and it's all about names and handshakes and reputations. But
that's it, yeah.
But Jackie was very loyal till both to the bands and entertainers and till the patrons as well. I mean, he looked after everybody there now. So
that was brilliant. I mean, I'm gutted. I am absolutely. I feel what really fell off my seat when you said Irish Demand played there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? I bitterly regret not buying our local paper all those years ago. You didn't even tell me that she was on.
I definitely would not. You wouldn't spoil it. No.
Oh, I feel a very strong letter coming here.
Please. Anyway.
A letter of disappointment.
Okay. Let's. You know, I when I started to watch the news again, and I see now that some of the nightclubs in Liverpool have letting in 200 and 300 people to a rave. I'm thinking, you know,
right.
In St Enda's, Seamus McCusker would have rang down and says at 11 or 12 o'clock from somewhere where he was with Brian Coll, what time did you close the doors at? And I know very well, and it's no secret, that it could have been in excess of 2,000 and maybe 2,400 people on Saturday nights there. And then they had a Friday country band, and then a Sunday night the big touring bands, so like the Memories and Love Bugs and Joanna Tequila Sunrise.
And I see the likes of Brush Shields would have played there as well.
Brush played there all the time. I loved it too, yeah. And we got to do the music before they came on, so we got to know these guys and talk to them as well. So
right.
That was a great time in our lives now, it really was.
Oh, no.
And many people now are probably thinking, you know, that we're there or have married now and have families of their own and would have met there in St Enda's and stuff. So let us know your memories, if you will, please.
So absolutely. And if anybody, especially has memories of Irish Dement, don't tell me, because it's just a knife in my heart.
I can't believe I've got one up on you, Mr. Ford. I really can't believe it. Anyway.
Oh, no. Well, I look forward to hearing the interview with Jackie. Because it actually, all caught in the side, it will bring back happy memories.
And of course, Seamus McCusker talks about his role as well, because Seamus was...
Brilliant.
And then there's a little tribute by Joanna Tequila Sunrise. It's recorded a week or two after Jackie passed away. I had a tape recorder in the back of the stage, and I spoke to them before they went on, so... You don't realise at the time that how valuable these wee tapes and interviews are, do you? Till 25, 30 years later.
That's it. That's when the true value comes out, you know?
Yeah.
And just think, Mr. McGurgan, in another 200 years' time, there'll be people listening to our dulcet tones, because we'll be in the ether.
You may be.
You've been on the ether many times yourself, but this time we'll actually end up in it.
Wouldn't it be great crack, hey? Looking down. Then, you know.
Do you think? Well, pride goes before a fall. In fact, I could not actually see you sitting up in a cloud playing your lyre and eating grapes. You know, as a child, I imagined that's what the angels did. They were floating about in cotton wool clouds, eating grapes for some reason. Grapes was a great luxury when I was a child.
I think, you know...
I imagine that's what you did when you died.
This is going to be discussed off air, Mr. Ford, but I have a theory or two for you that I'm going to discuss with you, but not with the great and good of Omagh, because it's not about that, but about the afterlife and before life and various things. So.
Oh God, I hope it's more enjoyable than 30.
Anyway, take care of yourselves. And,
on that note, goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Ford.
And may your God go with you.
Okay, Declan, to see you again, take care of yourselves. There's 4 interviews in this small programme. One is a very short interview with the late, great Jackie Martin, talking about, in 1986, about his plans and dreams to convert the nightclub into a hotel. Second interview is with Seamus McCusker, who was, or is well known, promoter in Ireland and was the personal manager to Brian Coll. The third interview is with the then chairman of St Enda, was Declan O'Neill from Omagh, well-known businessman in town as well. And the final interview is with one of Jackie's favourite bands who played in St Enda, and that is Joanna and Tequila Sunrise. So without further ado, folks, sit back, enjoy, and we hope to talk to you all soon.
St Enda's is quite well known in the town, but is the idea now that you're going to change the direction of what you've been doing there?
Well, at the moment I have an hotel in mind. In actual fact, I've got planning permission passed for there just recently, and I've got some circulars in there recently as well, indicating that the grants are now commencing again for hotels in April. So we'll be moving along that line in the near future.
I mean, I have to say, people will say, well, another hotel in Omagh, because there's already, there's two, there's the Royal Arms, and there's the Silver Birches and Knocknamoe a bit, although it's not used. I mean, do you think there's space for another hotel?
Oh, definitely, because I think some of the hotels most of them are only 20, and some of them down as low as 12 bedrooms. Maybe there's 2 20s and a 12, I'm not too sure. There's adequate room for another one in Omagh, and the one we have in mind is a 33-bedroom hotel, possibly a grade A 33-bedroom hotel.
Sounds great. I mean, are you expecting that many tourists? Do you think the tourists will?
Well, it will improve in 1992, of course. I think there'll be a massive change at that time with tourism and all the rest of it. And then we have the American Folk Park in Omagh. We have the Gorge and Glens, and plenty as well the Fermanagh Lakelands. Even we might be 25 miles from Enniskillen, but there's plenty of room for the hotels in the area.
Because obviously you've got the attractions of the American Folk Park. You've also got the new, what do you call the park? The Heritage Centre.
Yeah.
And they've also got the Glen itself. So, I mean, there's plenty there to attract. Are you working hand in glove with the tourist board in this?
Not at the moment yet, no, but it will be.
How difficult, I mean, how did you assess what the popularity would be for turning St Enda's into that?
Well, at the moment, our place is used very, very frequently. In actual fact, the other night when I went out there was 6 different functions on, and there was another one waiting, and there was no place to facilitate them. And our Omagh is rated in the GAA circles as the most central point in Ulster. And then we have coaching courses, we have seminars of all different, and they all land in Omagh. And we have the score competitions, the senior, and the score in the Ogue, and we have hosted All Ireland final there. We've had people coming up from Limerick, Cork, and all over, and we had just had a time to facilitate them in the hotels in the town as they were. So we within the association will get adequate support ourselves for an hotel.
Yeah, because one of the things I started off there by saying about St Enda's, I mean, it's a GAA club or centre, isn't that right?
That's right.
But I mean, do you think people in the town view it not so much as a GAA place, but as a social centre in itself?
Well, possibly, but at the same time, it would be recognised considerably within the GAA, because the county board in Tyrone use it regular for all different types of functions. Granted, it is looked upon as a major entertainment centre in Omagh. We draw Omagh being a central point with a good rural catchment area. We draw people from far apart. Actually, there's people come from Draperstown and South area to Omagh, and we have a big catchment area with rural towns around Omagh, all within a distance of a maximum of nearly 10 miles.
Because Omagh, I mean, a bit like some of the other places, I mean, Omagh isn't, it's big enough that it's not a place to pass through, if you know what I mean. Omagh, I mean, people who do pass through it on the way, like over to Donegal, but I mean, it's also a place, not just because of its size, which people would stop in, isn't it? I mean, it's not just a case of people have to come to Omagh, I mean, they actually want to come.
That's true, there's no doubt about that.
Did you meet up much opposition when you were suggesting turning St Enda's into a hotel?
Well, it's actually not finalised as such as yet. And
sorry, have you got much opposition at the moment to it?
Well, not. I think I'll get it through at committee level. I had more or less the same hassle at the time when I went forward with the club at present. There was strong opposition to it, but at the same time, I got it through, and it just went from success to success.
Well, why would there be opposition to it? I mean, why would you imagine there would be, or is there?
Well, you get the older hands who just don't see far enough, I reckon, in front of them, and you must look to the future all the time if you're to be successful. You have to keep that step in front all the time, and there may be a few people within the club who just wouldn't see eye to eye with me on that point, but I think at the back of it all, I will have the support.
Do you think there's a thing to be said for the fact, I mean, people recently, just to take a comparison, people have been saying like charities and so forth, and community organisations and voluntary organisations, need to become more commercially aware. Do you think the same thing is true with sporting organisations like the GAA that have to be more commercially aware of the way they can make money, or I mean, has it always been successful as it stands?
No, there's no doubt in my mind that was one of my thinking behind it at the very start of when we built the club, that we have to think more or less slightly on the commercial lines as well. And commercially, Omagh, I reckon, this is Saturday, if you look at Omagh on a Saturday night, it's probably the best entertainment centre in the north of Ireland, because if you count them, there'll be anything up from 4,000 to 5,000 people out in this town tonight. So Omagh is reckoned as possibly the major entertainment centre in Northern Ireland on a Saturday night. There's no doubt about that.
And St Enda is going to be obviously a part of it.
That's correct, we are.
What you are already, but you hope to even include a bit more. I was saying to some people about the fact that there's a lot of people moving in from the rural areas into the town. Do you think that you're getting the element of people coming from outside the town to the club as well? I mean, or is it residents mainly who come to it?
No, it's not. Actual fact, our biggest catchment area would still be the rural areas, not the urban area. And if you done a survey on our people, you'll find that I would say a good 75 to 80% of them are from the rural catchment area, not the urban area.
You've been in Omagh now, 36 years,
Yeah.
so you're just a youngster as far as the town's concerned. Being here, you've only been here for a while. I say that jokingly only because you're bound to have seen a lot of changes in Omagh over the years, certainly over the last 30 years. Has it suddenly, so people are saying it's suddenly jumped up in population?
Yeah, when I came to Omagh, I would say the population then would have been somewhere around 7,000 people, 6,000 to 7,000 people. I don't know the exact figure today, but I'd reckon it's somewhere in the region of 27 to 30,000 people. So there's a big, it's a big change in Omagh in the last 30 years. There's no doubt about that, and it's still improving.
For the future of St Enda, of course, that's very important. But do you think for the town as a whole, it's a good or a bad thing?
Well, I think
it's
a good thing for the town. In many ways, it's a good thing for the town as regards business-wise a lot. But Omagh is possibly one of the best provincial towns in the north of Ireland. There's no question or doubt about that. And to me, in the future, it's going to be even greater.
What makes it good for you?
It's hard to say that. It's just it's a very pleasant town, and it's a friendly type of town. The people are friendly. I came into Omagh now 36 years ago, was from a rural area, and I have more friends and as well known in this town as anybody. And that's because I find the people very friendly and easy with to get on with. And I have been involved with St Enda's now since 1954.
Do you think the people of the town expect, or encourage people to get involved, even though you came in as an outsider? Did you have any?
Yeah, well, I wasn't
accepted?
No, I was really encouraged to get involved with the club when I did come in 54, and I've been there ever since. That's 36 years now.
Because some people were saying, who was it quoted us saying that used to think of Omagh as just being a market town, and that was it. But they also said, but now it's got more to offer than that. Okay. That was Michael Murphy saying it's got a lot more to offer, because we were talking to Michael Murphy about the education man, and I was saying,
white folks.
I was saying that educationally has it changed because it's got to make more use of the industry and things like that in the area. And he said yes, it used to be just considered market town rural area, but actually there's not more concentration in the industry and commercial.
Yeah.
Would you say that's very true?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. But I still think that will improve even further in the years to come. I think Omagh will be in the 20th century. Omagh will be one of the key towns in Northern Ireland.
21st century.
Yeah, 21st.
Yeah. You came here. Why did you come here? Just for that interest?
Well, at that time there was no work as such in the small rural towns, and you moved into the urban area. Practically, that was my reason for coming at the start off. There was no work in the rural areas at that time, so you moved into the urban area.
Would you ever think of moving out again?
No, I'm very happy living in Omagh. Very happy.
Was there any other points you thought we should?
I was actually involved in politics in the town. I was a councillor for 10 years as well.
Yeah, well, okay. Do you want to talk?
No, we're not talking about that at all. Don't want to get involved in politics and wipe my hands of it.
Although I have been talking to Steve McKenna, and we were talking to Harold McColl, and talked to him.
I was on with Harold.
Where?
Yeah. Steve McKenna wasn't on my team.
No,
Harold was.
You were on with Harold at that time.
That's right.
But because it's one of the things I haven't talked an awful lot, because you don't want to talk about what used to be the local politics.
No, keep clear of it.
keep clear of
we get involved in politics.
Is it, I suppose that's one of your concerns as well, that it creates employment locally in local firms, yeah?
There's no doubt about that. I would reckon when the hotel is completed, we'll be employing somewhere in the region of 40 or 50 more people. We have a few employed at the moment, but it'll definitely increase. And if at all possible, I like to see local labour being used if at all possible. Even in the construction of the place, it'll be local labour if possible. That's what I have strongly in mind.
We have talked about people from outside coming to actually to stay there. But I mean, obviously, you want the local people to be involved and feel as if it's part of their. I mean, not that they own it because it's going to be another company, but the fact that it's very much something that they will make use of.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. As I said previous, I would hope to employ at least 40 or 50 people, and I would hope to be practically all people from the town area.
But I mean, even using the facilities, you want to be local people would use the facilities like conference rooms or function rooms.
Well, the GA uses it considerably for different things. The main function room will hold, it'll accommodate for conferences that somewhere in the region of 500, 600, maybe 700 people seated, that is. And then we'll have a very good members, which will be the hotel function room as well. That's what we're using at the moment as a members lounge. So we have adequate facilities once we get the hotel and the main function, the hotel end of it and the bedrooms up.
Seamus, in your own words, tell me what you remember about St Enda's nightclub.
Well, I suppose basically I didn't know a lot till it was built, and the famous, God rest him, Jack Martin came along and told me about this and asked me would I give them a hand with getting bands and maybe help them with the disco and things, and we took it from there. And but Jack being Jack, he was, he knew exactly what he wanted done. He knew exactly who he wanted and nearly what night he wanted them.
Had you any idea it was going to be the success that it was going to turn out to be at the time, at the very early days?
Nobody would have thought, because there was so much opposition. Knocknamoe was very big at the time. There was probably something in Saban as well, or Lifford, I'm not sure at the time, but the biggest one would be Knocknamoe. But once the place took off, it was the place to be, and a lot of that had to go down to the foresight of Jack Martin, because he even though there was huge opposition, he foreseen that if the right place was built and good car parking and stuff, that there was a market for it. So I would say he was definitely, along with Declan O'Neill, who were the two only, and Michael, a great man in the place out there was Michael Brogan. I think he was the treasurer maybe. And between them all, upstairs and downstairs, the whole thing was just a major success.
How did you choose the bands in those days? Because obviously a new club had to find its roots and stuff, and had to go by,
Well, we probably went, they would have asked me what I thought was the best in terms of what we would go with bands. Well, a lot of country people that would go to country bands mightn't necessarily go out on a Sunday, but they go on a Friday at that time. It wouldn't happen today now, but so we decided on try country on a Friday, the disco on a Saturday, and pop band on a Sunday, and it all worked from there. And the big bands, especially the Sunday night ones, probably the numbers was colossal. Like the smallest number you would expect to see would be 600 or 700 people on a bad night, maybe snow.
And big numbers could have hit well excess of 2,000, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Well, there was a long period of where, I was working, helping them with it, but I kept in touch with the club every Saturday night. And when you would ring about the disco, no matter where it'd be in Ireland, I would ring Jack Martin at about 12 o'clock, and the phone call wouldn't be about how many was in or nothing. It'd be just the question would be what time did the doors close, And if you're talking about doors closed, you were talking about certainly 2,000 people. And the first week or two, bands and people in general in the business, they would probably know more about it than I did. Nobody expected it to be the success that it was, but it was just colossal.
Yeah. I think Jack expected it to be the success because he was such a positive outlook man.
Well,
in his time,
that was, you know, I wasn't using his guidebook at all because I knew he was on a different planet from me. And but I thought, looking at other venues and how they're doing, if they get 1,000 people here on a Saturday night for a disco and maybe 500 or 600 at a pop band on a Sunday, that'd be massive. But those figures doubled, you know.
Was it difficult to get the bands at the start? Because obviously
the old story. Everybody played hardball for a wee while until the sea. And other venues will not talk about them, but other venues tried to stop you getting bands. But, you know, we got everything, you know, all types of entertainment we had. Like when you went from one extreme, like maybe Phil Coulter to the
Glenn Miller band.
Glenn Miller, yeah.
Glenn Miller was there, I remember that.
And
Hey, Johnny Cash there as well.
His son, and, you know, and we had them all, and including Gary Glitter, who nobody knew about his problems. But even then, if we had no problems at the time, it wasn't a success.
Yeah, well, you know.
We had a couple of failures, that was one of them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember booking a band that everybody thought I was nearly getting locked up. Everybody thought I'd lost my marbles altogether when I mentioned a group called Hot House Flowers. And they were just colossal too, and lovely people. And I think they're still working.
I believe so, yeah. Your bands like the Memories.
Well, the big Sunday night bands was the Memories.
Joanna Tequila
Sunrise. Lovebug. Geraldine Brannigan, the Brannigans. Bagatelle, who I have to say, okay, 3 prime nights. Remember they done 3 Easter Sundays in a row, all of which were over 2,000 people on a Sunday night, and not at a disco.
Yeah.
You know, so they were colossal there. But then they were probably a band doing good business everywhere. You know, so but Omagh was just. Nobody thought, I don't know, even Jack, optimistic and all as he was, I doubt if he figured it could be that big, you know. But it surpassed everything, you know.
As you said, it wasn't an ideal disco. It was a function hall. It wasn't really a disco venue for lighting or sound.
But yet you couldn't call it a nightclub.
No, it wasn't a nightclub, no.
And nor I suppose if you wanted to be technical about it, you couldn't call it a ballroom. You know, it's just a big building that held a lot of people.
Yeah.
Going back to what you said there about the bands, you know, like probably they all played safe to see who else would be playing it, how it was doing, and then once them figures got general knowledge as bands, people will tell you that the big bands, some of them don't speak to each other, they don't like each other. But never fall for that, because they all talk to each other and mark each other's cards as to where not to be or where to be. And from there on, just, you know, all you had to do was your diary. I mean, you didn't have to make phone calls. The bands were ringing you. Yes. Yeah. And I coined a sort of a phrase of my own, which applied to a lot of these things in that business, especially if you're selling a band. It depends on the phone call. Usually if you're making calls, it's not good. If you're taking call, you know, if somebody ringing looking for what you're selling, you're in a better position to do well, you know. So Omagh became one of them places that the people just, at the big bands, pop and country, they just, I mean, we had Daniel O'Neill, I think there 3 times, and that's from the top down. And you know, the Friday was never as big, could not be as big as a Saturday or a Sunday, but it was as good as Friday night dancing could be, you know. I mean, even now in this day and age, forget about where we're living at the minute and the times we're living in, but in better times in the last 4 or 5 years, and the whole 32 counties, there was three Friday night venues that were respectable.
This is the thing. I mean, when you did say that, you had a Friday night for country band, a disco on a Saturday, then your pop band on a Sunday for a small rural town 60 miles west of Belfast. It's unheard of. And you also had all the best DJs as well, because you were picking guys from RTE2, and just people.
But, and to be fair, I wouldn't. I'm not saying it because I'm sitting here with you, Don, but like really, the expenditure that was on the guest DJs really was extravagant. Because the numbers were going to the DJs, the resident DJs, and the numbers were there, but it definitely helped the fact that certainly every second week there was a guest name on the disco as well, which no other disco was doing them sorts of things. Everybody was just bleeding to death, the whole thing with the resident DJ, and that was it. So Omagh was different in that respect, and maybe that was one of the factors too, plus the fact it wasn't, I think when that disco started in 85, was it? Or 84?
84.
84.
Yeah.
I think it was just £2 into it on a Saturday night.
Yeah. £2, yeah.
And but it still amounted to a lot of money, So, yeah.
I mean, as you said, the expenses weren't great, to the outgoings, because obviously the resident DJs wouldn't be on any major amount of money, but and it was all a very good natured place. I mean, okay, it lent itself because it had the right car park and the right atmosphere, and I'm talking about 35 years later, people still remember it and talk about it and still want to hear about it.
Oh God! I would still get phone calls from people down the country. Whatever happened to the Omagh St Endas, or what was it? What was the right name of it? I'm trying to think what the name of it was myself. Was there a name on it?
No, I was too close to know. I just knew the St Endas of the Gal.
Yeah.
That's what they called it. But there probably was a name on the nightclub. All right, there was at the very start. That's one for anybody out there listening to us now. What was it called? I don't remember.
Oh, it'll come back to us.
Yeah.
But it was very successful, and I suppose, like everything else, it ran its race. Then, while numbers started to get smaller everywhere, and smaller venues, more luxurious, took over for discos too.
Yeah. And Jackie, hope he's happy, had a great vision for a hotel.
Yeah, I suppose God only knows if he had got the time how that would have ended up, or would I honestly think it would have happened. Maybe in hindsight, as we're sitting here now, maybe it was lucky enough it didn't happen, But he was all the time thinking ahead.
Yes, he was a guy who was ahead of his time. And anybody that knows Jack Martin would remember him. What Jackie said, his word was his bond as well.
Oh yeah, very much so. He was very honourable, and he'd on his nights there'd be nothing on. He might come to my house and sit. He could be there for 3 or 4 hours, and the conversation would be about dancing and about the club and what could we do to make it bigger. And I remember saying to him one night, and he'd just give me a big yawny look. I said, "What do you mean bigger?" Sure, it is very big. It's a big building, and we're big numbers. So
yeah,
that couldn't have got any bigger in terms of the building or the numbers. Them things will never happen again.
No, I think that's a one-off. In a lifetime, you see those things coming
and
and
it
go.
was nice to be a part of it.
It was for us all, for those who worked there, privileged to work there, and those who came to be entertained there as well. I think and the memories are very, very good on it. But Jack had always an interest in numbers and how other venues were doing as well.
It was just in his blood to do that. And I mean, apart from his business insurance with Peter McAlear's, he thought about, that was his main train of thought, was the club.
Yeah. Looking back on the bands like Brush Shields and stuff, you such a diverse range of bands on Sunday night, but you had the same people coming for the same bands or for different bands.
Yeah, well, you just probably there was a base crowd of probably 300 to 400 anyway. We went to everybody, and that included the Brush and Teddy Palmer, and because there wasn't a Joanna or a Lugburg or a Rock Stewart. There wasn't one for every Sunday, Even though probably the big bands, Sunday venues were getting scarce, and everyone was looking for more Sundays in Omagh, which meant you didn't get an opportunity to play a lesser band, as I called them, ones that were you weren't allowed to play anything. It was in the second league, second division. I mean, Jack wanted first division stuff all the time, So, it paid off for them, and it was. Nobody thought. Everybody would have. A lot of people thought it could be a fairy tale that'll be over in 12 months, but it certainly wasn't.
No.
And even as it came to the very end, when it was just when we were running an underage disco, you could still get 500 and 600 people, and there was very little expense on it. And but for some reason, the police just came along and stopped it, while those other venues like hotels could, for whatever the reason was, a club couldn't continue with theirs, but a hotel could.
But looking back on when it was so busy, did you worry about the crowd and the possible accidents that could have happened in various things? Did it cross your mind at the time?
Oh God, I would have been somebody who wouldn't have liked to have been in the middle of that number, and that was just me as an older person, and you would panic a lot quicker than, the ones who was in there, they couldn't wait to get into the middle of it and enjoyed every minute of it, lapped it up. But there was always someone at the back of your mind said, even the biggest nights that were very successful, you were glad to see them over too, on that night. And you could say, there was might have been somebody put out for being too drunk or doing something like that, but there was no fights, no bad problems, no wrecking.
No.
And
I remember the New Year's Eve was always a huge night in it.
Yeah.
It had started about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
You started.
That's it. The doors were definitely closed early that night, so. Oh, okay, anywhere there was a roof and 4 walls, New Year's Eve was big, so.
Yeah.
But as big as it could be. But,
and from the millennium, that has all dwindled as well. I don't see anywhere running now New Year's Eve at all, or very few people.
Well, I think the Millennium Night changed a lot of things in a way that nobody foreseen until it was over. There was all sorts of stories about bar staff have to get 3 times their wages, doormen have to get 3 times their wages, and everything, and drink be bigger and more expensive and all that. People stayed away, and but I think that sowed the seed for house parties. Because what I was doing, working with bands, coming home, it was obvious then from there on a New Year's Eve, if when you're coming home, every house you came past along on a main road, there was maybe a dozen cars at it, which meant there was some kind of a party on, And I think that, New Year's Eve is no longer a big night.
No, definitely not. No, it's as I say, the millennium seemed to was the death knell for that, and it never came back after that. As you said, people decided we're going to stay in. And when people stay in,
I know, but it was a thing. Whether it was true or false, I'm not really sure. But people thought they were going to be cleaned on the night financially, so they said, "Okay, we'll stay away." Yeah. And they got a taste of doing their own thing and having a party and. Yeah. Well, that was the right thing or the wrong thing, we don't know, but it happened.
Now that I have you here, tell me about, how did you get into this whole business at all?
You mean bands?
The bands, yeah.
Well, I suppose I loved going to hear bands, and as my mother would have said, stand with your mouth open listening to a band all night, I did like that, and probably I have to boast them. A lot of the credit would go to Brian Coll, actually, for God rest the man, for he knew Platinum at their height that had played the Palindrome and Saban every so often, and I'd went down and you'd have been standing listening to them the whole night, not moving, and he'd come down and talk to you, and he knew you had an interest, and how did it move. I was working in Aiken's garage, and for the people that know it, there was a big ramp up into the back workshop. And this day, anyway, he came flying up this ramp on a big motorbike that Joey Dunlop would neither need nor want. Stopped, and everybody got all the helmets off and come over to me and say, I want you to manage my band, you know. So I thought it was a big joke. I knew it wasn't April Fool's Day or whatever, but we went outside, the two of us, and we talked about it, and I said, you know, I really don't know anything about it. And he says, but, you know, I'll take you around all the venues in Ireland, let you meet all the promoters, and which he did do, faithfully. And but it was a huge gamble for him, because he was just after leaving the most, in my opinion, the most celebrated man in the business, Jamaican, and go to a motor mechanic, you know. And but it worked, and it wasn't all smooth, you know. First couple of years, I suppose, was tough, and like Brian would have been singing a lot of American. He just was George Jones, Slim Hotman, Bug Owens on the brain, you know, and Mick Clerkin talked him into to record two songs that he did not want to do. One of them was These Are My Mountains, and the follow-up to it was a song called Give an Irish Girl to Me. And from there on, for the next 10 years, you know, it was 6 nights a week. You know, there was times you actually didn't answer the phone because you were getting
people looking for him,
bombarded like all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And so we had a good run, and it lasted 25 years, and you can't complain about that.
No.
As I said before, we didn't necessarily agree about everything, but we had an agreement that if someone I didn't like today, or he didn't like it, you know, or we should have done differently, that argument didn't exist tomorrow. And that's sort of the way we kept it, and it worked well. So I'd have to give all the credit otherwise, I mean, I would have been, nobody else was going to make that gamble and walk into somebody in a garage and say, I want you to manage a band.
Yeah.
It just wasn't going to happen.
You obviously seen the potential that you didn't see in yourself, Seamus.
Well, I didn't. And you know, I just like listening to bands, you know, and I knew that while I was working in the garage, I loved cars and still do, but that was in my head, you know, so. And we tried it, or we talked about it, and we came to, he was, at the time, he was he had a contract with Con Hines and Barney Corley for 2 years. And initially they agreed to let him out of the contract. And then whenever certain people told certain people who was involved, listen, no, nothing from Omagh was going to manage this band, so they got their heels into the ground, and you know, they all wanted me out. The Con Hineses and Barney Corleys that wanted rid of me, and they were bringing in somebody else. But Brian stood his ground, and he said, you know, no, I want this man to do this job. I picked him, and I'd like him to do it. At which case, the famous Con Hines, who's now dead, a very, very powerful man, owned every marquee in Ireland, any place there was that particular time, there was a carnival in every town. Everybody would get their marquees from him, and he had a lot of power, and he owned associated ballrooms. And he did say to Brian, you know, that if you don't get rid of him, this is me, if he didn't get rid of me, that they wanted another guy in from Galway, and that he would have to basically, you know, he would earn no money for 2 years. You'd have to fast. Now, there was colourful language used, which we're not going to redo here, but this is how they put it to him, you know, get rid of him or you'll not work, and you'll have to starve for. And this is, we're called to a meeting in Dublin, and this took place at a meeting in Dublin in a famous office. And again, Brian gambled huge. And he stood up and he said to me, right, Che, aye, right, we'll head down the road home and start this fast. And Con Hines stood up and he said, colourful language again, sit down, you, bop, 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 and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
From there on, there wasn't a problem, you know.
There you are. Just
Like there was times him and I didn't always agree about lots of things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But people would maybe expect me to say different things about him, I don't know. But you speak of everybody as you find them.
Of course you do, yes. Yeah.
I never would have got an opportunity only for him.
Yes.
And I mean, he took an awful gamble to leave. God loved Jamaica and he was a great man. And to leave an organisation like that, and then a few months later to be confronted by Con Hines and Barney Corley and told, get rid of this guy. And when he stood up again for me, you know. So I think there's not much more I could say about him, you know.
Yeah, well, it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what about the personalities in Brian Coll's band, like a Declan O'Neill and stuff? When did they come into the band, or had you?
Well, God rest Artie would have been there for a long time before that, you know, and that job it kind of alternated for different reasons between him and Brenton Sweeney from Bermonstown. And because at the time when Brian Coll probably left the Platterman to go to that, he went to the Claxton, I think, which involved maybe Brenton Sweeney and Jerry Quinn and those guys. And Artie probably would have been maybe with Frankie McBride at the time, you know. And there's different personalities and different, you know, possibly the man I got on best with was the guy who started the same day as me, Jim Bradley, God rest him. He was a piano player and singer and great man, and him and I travelled together all the time, and he was there for about 8 or 9 years, and then he got into bad health when he left. But, you know, possibly he was the closest I was to anybody ever in the band, you know, because we travelled a lot together.
Yeah.
I mean, it was probably a period of, say, out of them 10 years, there had been a period of maybe 6 or 7 years when you were averaging 1,000 miles a week. So we done it.
And bad roads as well.
You know, there was no motorways, there was no mobiles if you did get stuck.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah.
it was as good as it could be at the time. And
You mentioned the carnivals there in passing. Where were the most successful carnivals?
well, that's a huge question because, you know, and there are very few bad ones. Very few carnivals ever fit because they were a novelty item once a year in your town.
Yeah.
But probably a few more, like Monaghan was very big, Cavan was very big. Now, one particular year, Brian Coll played, was at 19 marquees in Galway, in one area, all in and around Ballinasloe, Lochray. And every year he went down, he had a good following from, I don't know the name of the hospital, it's a mental hospital on the way into Ballinasloe. And there was a lot of nurses would have come out to a place we were playing in Kiltormer out the road. And so they asked him about doing a concert. And he went back once every 2 years with the band, set up, maybe on our way to one of them carnivals or whatever. It wasn't advertised, nothing like that. Set up the gear and played for an hour and a half or something for all the patients. And we got probably tremendous goodwill out of that, you know. You know, a lot of people that just went out. You know, he wasn't one of the people who said, "Okay, we'll do a charity concert, but I don't want anything, but I need £1,000 for the band." That didn't, you know, it was done free. That went out, that news was called spread, and we got huge, massive work out of Galway direction out of that, you know, in the whole west of Ireland, you know. But again, on the question of marquees were so big that if you can recall, they were 2-week things, but then ended up the following Tuesday. They all closed on a Tuesday night.
But they built a lot of schools and built a lot of churches and things, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Or parishes and football clubs and various things, yeah.
Well, I'll not say that you got paid for everybody when it got into the marquee. I don't know, but they were difficult to keep an eye on. But that's another story. You know?
But they were what they were,
Yeah.
And jumping forward to this whole lockdown, we're hopefully coming through, hopefully coming to the other side of, Seamus. What do you see the future for live entertainment now?
Well, I suppose it's, a lot of people, older ones now, were going to be afraid to go out for a while, and maybe won't. If the social distancing stays to any extent, I can't visualise how a dance would operate.
Are you afraid for the future for bands and live acts here?
Well, a lot of young, we'll not name them now, but I mean, I could name me half a dozen fellas that put bands on the road maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. And they were just maybe building nicely and getting going. And then this came along and stopped everything. And I would safely say some of them made no money out of it, because they were spending on gear and vans and recordings and stuff. Whether a lot of them, where someone mightn't even want to try it again, I don't know.
No. They might have profile that's lost as well, obviously, if you're not in the music. Yeah, of course.
But I know, but then again, the other side of that is, you have the 5 big boys, the Denvers, the Buckleys, Michael English, Derek Ryan, the 4 or 5, they were just, it can't be as big as it was because numbers will not be allowed in. But they won't have the problem that probably lesser bands will have,
Looking back, Seamus, long career, would you do it all again if you could?
Yeah. But there's ifs and that, okay. If you could turn back the clock and time, which we can't,
No.
At my age now, I definitely wouldn't be, you wouldn't be heading out to manage a band anymore,
No.
Then again, that the management of bands is all, there's no such thing, there's not 3 band managers in Ireland anymore. There's a girl in an office taking phone calls, talking to the lead singer who usually owns the band. And, it's done a different way now, and, it used to be a diary in your pocket. If somebody's seen a diary in your hand, they won't think there's something wrong with you.
Well, it's been worth it, I suppose, at the same time. I mean, you have enjoyed it, and it must have been a risk at the time, tempting as it was, to leave a secure job and take on something as precarious as managing a band with that sort of profile like Brian Coll.
Well, yeah, the one wee thing that sticks out in that is when you mentioned that is, the problem I had telling my mother and father that I was leaving. They couldn't get their head around that. They were alive, and that was 1970. Both of them they were still there until 1983. But don't leave your good steady job,
Yeah.
But I mean, there was no. You were sure if you wanted to buy a shirt, you were saving for 6 months.
God, yeah.
So again, it could have all backfired on me too badly. But thankfully, it worked out all right.
Yeah.
And all that, that has to it's not due to my skill or anything or doing anything, but it was due to the ability of Brian Coll. Yeah. I mean, if you have the article that they want, anybody can sell it.
Yeah.
And if they're not looking for it, by God, you've spent a fortune on the phone trying to do it, Yes. That's what I meant by, it all depends on the phone call where you're taking it.
The old saying is, if you can't sell it, you can't give it away.
Yeah.
So that's true enough, James.
But then again, that time, my God, you could go 5 weeks in the year at least to England. You could play a week around London, the big Irish clubs. For the whole, not leave London. Forget about the Birminghams, Manchesters for a trip, and you could do the whole thing in London. Now there's not even Irish entertainment in London. That around the same time, you probably had 4 very big Saturdays nights in Dublin. You had Thursdays, you had the Irish Club, which was on every night. You could have played Dublin on a Saturday, went down the country and played the Sunday, come back up on the Monday and played the Irish Club on your way home. That's all away,
What did you do during Lent? Did the things shut down then? What's the time for yourselves? Or?
No, well, it probably wasn't as bad as that. I think before that, before my time, it might have been worse, where there was nearly a Sunday go to the dance. But it certainly didn't help, and everybody tried to be in England at least once during Lent, Yeah. And then there were a so-called holiday was taken then for a couple of weeks, which has sort of killed the 6 weeks,
What other bands did you promote during your time, Seamus, do you?
Well, I've done a bit of work with a few that I will not mention, and for various reasons. I had a very successful 11-year stint with Kieran McGilligan, which was very, very successful. And probably one of the most professional people I worked with would have been Noel McCaffrey for 3 years. But it didn't work out in the end for one of the reasons, the pop scene was tied up by a few promoters. And if you weren't one of them, you weren't getting work. And if you were getting work, it was only survival. So she decided she was going to change to something different. And but very honourable person, very easy to work with, and really could sing.
Great singer, yeah, great voice. I remember her. She did the odd Sunday night in St Enda's as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I remember that, yeah. But
yeah, really, she put her heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
I suppose I remember doing a wee bit of the country flavour one time, but it didn't work out really because, we were still doing the Brian Coll thing, and it was confusing, to put it that way, because they probably country flavour expected to be where he was, and I mean, he was a step ahead of them, and that was it, I mean, it'd have been different maybe if Philomena Begley was still in the country flavour, but she had moved on as well, so.
Yeah.
And it's just, as Jim Bradley, God love the man, used to always say, and he called everybody son, every man, he'd say to me an odd tinkle, you were sleeping maybe, or you think you were sleeping. He'd say, what's the best song I ever wrote, son? And I knew what he was going to say, Jim, tell me, time changes everything.
So it does. It really does. But it was a heyday in Omagh, and the people of Omagh still remember it, Seamus, and thanks for taking the time to sharing your memories with us.
Well, thanks for asking me out to do it. It's a pity just that we couldn't put back the clock and do it all over again, but we can't.
Yeah. There's no dress rehearsal, I suppose.
No.
Anyway, Seamus, thanks again.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Don.
Bye-bye.
How would you describe him?
Well, it is very, very difficult to describe. You couldn't describe Jackie Martin even in a sentence. I mean, he was a type of person who just loved meeting people. For start off, he loved conversation. He loved sport. Of course, obviously, he gave his whole life to it. And he was a very, very good person to know because he just liked being involved with people and he loved company.
Tell me about his football days. I mean, he was a referee. I would have first known him.
Well, his football career actually ended quite abruptly. He was a great footballer in the early 50s. He would have been one of the good Tyrone player, great forward, powerful speed, and great man to jump for a ball. And he was a type of man, he used his good points to the very end. But he had a terrible problem with his knees. He got knees damaged quite often, and he ended up, I think he gave up football at 28 years of age, and he took up the refereeing immediately then.
Did he referee in his sock soles? Was that just a story?
Oh, he did surely. Oh, I loved refereeing in the sock soles. He always maintained that he could move far quicker. Didn't like wearing boots at all in his refereeing, not even slippers. Even in the wet days, still would have wore sock soles. Loved their sock soles.
Now tell me how the idea about building up St Enda's, was that always a dream both of you had, was it?
Well, it was a great, I suppose, dream of his in the 60s and 70s when St Enda's purchased the ground known now as Healy Park. Jackie's ambition at that time was to have a nice social complex beside it. That was his idea. But of course at that time money was hard to come by, and it cost quite a bit of money to build the park, and it was the social side was shelved for a while. And then in the early 70s, the club then bought the premises on the Gorton Road, sort of a ready-made warehouse, and converted it But Jackie's dream all the time was that wasn't right. You know, it was too far away from the pitch, and that we would still need to go ahead with our own plan. And having sort of put up with the other for 5 or 6 years, he felt that in the early 80s, now's the time to go. And the debt on the ground had been paid off, and the club were in a fairly good way of going at the time, and he felt that was the time to make the move. And there was a special meeting called. It didn't get a unanimous sort of green card, but it got a fairly substantial number of the people decided, right, Jackie has this plan. Himself and I more or less muted the plan to the committee, and from there on it took its course.
It was obviously a very ambitious building as well, probably more so than anyone would have expected.
Well, initially it was a sort of agreed that we would phase the development. That part of it would be built initially, and then that we would sort of leave it for a year or two, and then we'd go ahead with the bigger ballroom side. But having got professional advice when the programme got started, it was agreed then that this was going to be sort of making double work. Site work was equally as expensive as actual building, and you would have to do double site work. So we decided then, once we got the plan sort of drawn up and the work started, that we would go for broke and do the whole lot. That was, I suppose, at the end of the day, that was the type of person he was. He motivated myself and everybody else that was involved. This is the thing to do, and we go and do it. You know,
there was a success beyond your wildest dreams as well, wasn't it?
Oh, very much so, Don. Well, Jackie would have been one person would have always said it had to go. He had a great feeling for it, and he felt that the town and the area needed it, and he was very confident now from day one that it would be a success from every point of view. And well, 7 years down the road, I suppose we'd have to say that it was.
Just before he died, he had plans, or had discussed plans of making it into a possible hotel. Had he lived, would that dream of his been fulfilled, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, we'll never know. I would have to say that any great idea that Jackie ever thought of, they nearly all came to fruition. No doubt about it. Had a great plan in mind, and I've no doubt that everything being equal now, they would have been moved in that direction.
How would you remember him yourself?
Well, personally, I mean, to me, over the last 20 years, he probably was my closest friend. Outside of my own family, I suppose he was, as far as the GA was concerned, and all our workings in St Enda, he was my right-hand man at all times. And he was a person that you could always confide in. If you wanted assistance in any shape or form, you talked to Jackie. He was a great motivator, he was a good thinker, he was a great driver when work was being done. I think this is where we would miss him most. In the years ahead, if we were to embark on any major development, you know, the fact that his presence won't be there will be a big deterrent, because during all the course of the development, he was always there. He was there night, noon and morning, and great man to get work done. Absolutely.
St Enda's GA has outlived him. It's almost a monument to him, would you say?
Oh, without doubt. Without doubt. I mean, the building that we know now as St Enda Social Centre, it stands as a monument to Jackie's memory, and from a personal point of view, I'm very proud of the fact that I've worked with him on it. And I don't think that I'll ever see anybody as closely involved again.
Joanna, can you tell me the first time you met Jack Martin?
First time we met Jackie would have been here in St Enda's. I have to be honest, I can't genuinely remember the first gig here. They've just all been so good, and everything has been so good in St Enda's, and the vibe has always been great friendly atmosphere. I suppose the only way to describe it is that when you make friends with somebody, it just goes on, and you don't remember Not that you want to forget, but you just don't remember when you make friends.
How does St Enda's compare to all the places you would play, possibly?
Very hard to compare it. It's definitely the best. It is the best in the country. And that's not only in the 6 counties, that's the 32 counties.
Andy, what would you say makes it special?
It's very hard to put that on point, because if you went to the west of Ireland or to the Cork or Kerry, there's clubs that go pretty well, but not as well as this one. Whatever the GAA club has here, it works. But I think it's very hard to distinguish Jackie as one man and the club and the committee. I'm not being political here, but I mean honestly is that he was unique. He was a man that just didn't work part of the club. It was a 24-hour day job for him, even though he was into insurance and everything else. But this was his job. He went dancing. He was really, he was totally into what was happening in the nightlife, what band had many people, where they were and what they were.
He seemed very much aware of it.
Absolutely, yeah. That was a big part of all this whole. He was very much in tune with the young people coming in the door, everybody. Knew a lot of them by names.
I suppose the best way to describe him was he was a very dedicated person.
Absolutely.
To St Enda's, and also he ran it was a very tight ship. There was nobody questioned Jackie. No. Whatever Jackie said was law.
He didn't suffer fools gladly, but yet the people that would have known him and actually would have had arguments with him gone by were still very vexed at his death, and still said that because you fell out with Jack Martin, it wasn't a permanent thing. You could go back the next day and start again. Did you find that the same?
Absolutely. We never had a problem with Jackie. If you asked us to do a charity, Jackie, just call us when you need us. We're there. It was always that, and whatever way we did the business, whatever he said, it always went. There was never a change of anything he agreed on. A man of the word.
I think probably from our personal experiences with Jackie, it was a case of once you were totally honest with him, he was the same with you. He gave 100% to you, and vice versa. That's how we worked with Jackie. We never worked any other way with him.
That's very rare in the clubs today in Ireland and any club around, a guy to stick to everything they agree on. Very rare.
Especially
very hard to find.
In the entertainment business, obviously.
Absolutely, very hard to find. We were assessing that just a few months ago when Jackie passed, and even before Jackie passed, we were talking about. We always said the day Jackie leaves this, he'll be sadly missed in the business. And we're actually assessing all the other venues we play, and the personalities and the deals we did with people over the years. He's way ahead of the posse. There isn't anybody close to him. He was spotless in deals.
How will you remember him?
Oh God, that's very difficult. I do remember lots of things about Jackie, but I suppose one of the funniest for me would have been we got very friendly with Jackie personally, on a personal note, and his wife Gladys. They actually came down to our wedding, which was a very rare thing for Jackie to do. He got into the car and he came down to the wedding 4 years ago, and I suppose it snowballed after that, and we were coming up quite regularly to St Enda's at that time playing. And we always took our tea down in the centre of town in one of the Chinese restaurants. And one evening he'd asked us to come over and have our tea with himself and Gladys and stay over. So we said, fine, great, Jackie, next time we're up we'll do it. And when we come up and we went to the house, poor Gladys was in a tizzy, because he'd said to her, now Gladys, whatever you do, these people only eat Chinese, so you better give them Chinese.
Gladys was up the wall. She didn't know how to do Chinese. What am I going to do?
And she said, and I wouldn't mind, Joanna, but Jackie is a potatoes man, and his piece of meat in a casserole, that was his most favourite dish. And I always used to slag him over it afterwards, saying, well, by God, for potatoes and meat, man, and you're telling me that I'm a Chinese.
My best one I remember is going upstairs after the gigs, and I don't smoke. Always gave me the cigarette, and out chimney smoking, and he'd be passing it back and forth to me, and he'd say, I'd be telling him how the business is. He'd be able to tell you by we say 520. No, you had 250, and he says, I know. Sure, I was talking to P.O. as well, and P.O. and Finn, Brian Finley, and he'd know. You couldn't kid him. He knew everything. You couldn't catch him. He was ahead of the posse.
'Tis many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown, but in all their grandeur and tapes lips to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.